I never thought my sister could be so petty. I mean, we grew up in the same house, shared the same parents, and yet, when it came to my wedding, she saw an opportunity to prove something about what I still can't fully understand. One day, I discovered she had scheduled her wedding on the exact same date as mine, out of sheer spite. At first, I was frozen, trying to comprehend how someone could be so manipulative. But as the reality sank in, I realized I had a choice to make, a choice that would turn everything upside down. Growing up, my sister, Julia, always had this way of making everything about her. Mom and Dad seemed to give her every bit of attention she demanded, while I learned early on that I had to fight for even the smallest scraps of acknowledgement. Birthdays, holidays, achievements, it didn't matter what I accomplished, Julia always managed to upstage me, whether intentionally or not. I used to brush it off, telling myself it was just sibling rivalry, but deep down, it left a mark. Every success I had felt like it came with a shadow looming over it, a shadow in the shape of my sister's smug smile. Our parents weren't innocent either. They had this habit of comparing us constantly. Julia's so organized, Courtney, maybe you should take a page from her book. Julia has such good taste, you should see how she decorated her room. At first, I thought they were just trying to guide me, but eventually, it became clear they were actively favoring her. Every milestone I reached was met with mild applause, while hers were celebrated like national holidays. The tension between us grew over the years, though we always kept up the facade of sisterly love. On the surface, we smiled for family photos, exchanged polite gifts during the holidays, and even laughed at the same jokes, but behind closed doors, it was a battlefield. I had learned to pick my battles carefully. If I wanted peace, I had to bite my tongue. But this wedding situation? That was a battle I couldn't ignore. When I got engaged to Mark, I was thrilled, despite knowing what that might mean in the context of my family. Mark was everything I had dreamed of, kind, patient, and completely in love with me. We spent months planning the perfect wedding, choosing a venue, sending out invitations, and envisioning our special day. It felt like a dream come true, until I discovered the date conflict. The first time I realized what had happened, I thought it was a mistake. Surely my sister couldn't have been that deliberate. But when I confronted her, the truth came out. Julia had booked the same venue on the same day, fully aware of my wedding plans. Her reasoning? She wanted to celebrate her special day first and didn't see why I couldn't adjust. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. All the years of subtle manipulation, favoritism, and petty jealousy had culminated in this audacious act. I couldn't believe it. I spent hours wrestling with my emotions. Anger, disbelief, hurt, and a sense of betrayal washed over me in waves. Every memory of our childhood unfairness came rushing back, and suddenly, this wasn't just about a wedding date, it was about finally standing up for myself. I knew I had to make a decision, but it couldn't be rash. It had to be calculated, powerful, and completely unexpected. Mark and I had dreamed of a spring wedding for as long as we could remember. We wanted something intimate but elegant, a day filled with laughter, love, and memories we would cherish forever. Months were spent visiting venues, tasting cakes, and debating over flowers. Every detail mattered, from the color of the napkins to the playlist at the reception. It was exhausting, but it was worth it. This was our day, and I wanted it to be perfect. The more I immersed myself in planning, the more excited I became. My sister, on the other hand, seemed to hover nearby, making subtle comments that I initially brushed off. "You'll probably want to pick a date after mine anyway, right?" she would say, feigning casualness. I laughed it off at first, thinking it was just nervous excitement from her side. But deep down, I felt a chill every time she spoke that way. As the months passed, the final date for my wedding was secured. Invitations were sent, deposits paid, and schedules finalized. Everything was coming together beautifully. Then, the bombshell dropped. One afternoon, while checking my email for RSVP updates, I noticed a confirmation for Julia's wedding venue, on the exact same date as mine. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. There was no way this could be coincidence. I confronted her immediately, expecting maybe a flustered apology or an attempt to reschedule. But Julia's smug expression said it all. "I know it's the same date," she admitted casually. "But I booked it first online, so I guess we're just celebrating together. You can move yours if it's a big deal." Her words were deliberate, cold, and calculated. She had done this out of spite, fully aware of the chaos it would cause. I felt my stomach twist with anger and disbelief. How could she do this? Our parents, predictably, sided with her. Courtney, maybe it's easier if you just change your date, Mom suggested. Dad nodded silently, offering no support. Every instinct in me screamed that I shouldn't back down. This wasn't just about a date, it was a statement about who controlled the narrative, about whose happiness mattered more. And I realized, in that moment, that I couldn't let her win. Mark was furious on my behalf, but he was also calm enough to remind me that this was our wedding. It's your day, Courtney. Don't let her steal it, he said. Those words gave me the courage to think strategically. I had to turn the tables, to make a decision so unexpected that Julia wouldn't know how to respond. It had to be satisfying, it had to assert my boundaries, and most importantly, it had to be unforgettable. I started planning quietly. I gathered information about the venue, researched alternative options, and even considered subtle ways to shift attention back to our wedding. But the key was patience. I couldn't act rashly. I needed the perfect moment to execute a plan that would leave everyone stunned, especially Julia. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my dignity and proving that I wouldn't be undermined by family favoritism. Julia's sabotage went beyond just the date. She began sending passive-aggressive messages to our family and friends, subtly undermining my plans. I'm so excited to finally have a day that everyone will remember, she wrote, tagging relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. Invitations for my wedding suddenly became a topic of negotiation, with relatives suggesting, maybe you should reschedule so both events can be attended. It felt like the walls were closing in. The more I resisted, the more audacious her tactics became. She hired the same florist I had wanted, booked the same photographer, and even tried to secure the same caterer. Everything she did was designed to create confusion, stress, and resentment. Every time I spoke up, the family gasped at my overreaction, while Julia smiled innocently, basking in the chaos she created. It was exhausting, and yet, a small part of me felt the adrenaline of the challenge. I realized that how I responded now would define the rest of our relationship. There were moments of doubt. Could I really go through with a confrontation that might escalate into full-blown family drama? Could I risk turning relatives against me in the pursuit of justice? But every memory of childhood favoritism, every birthday overshadowed, every achievement minimized, strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about the wedding, it was about finally standing up to a lifetime of subtle oppression. I decided I needed allies. I quietly spoke to close friends and supportive family members, explaining the situation without exaggeration. Their responses validated my feelings. They were shocked at Julia's audacity and encouraged me to reclaim my date, my wedding, and my dignity. With their support, I felt more empowered than ever. I realized the power of a well-executed plan. It wasn't about confrontation, it was about strategy, timing, and self-respect. Meanwhile, Julia continued her game, unaware that I was observing every move. I noted her appointments, the vendors she contacted, even the way she posted about her plans on social media. Every piece of information became ammunition for a carefully orchestrated response. I wasn't going to react impulsively, I was going to act deliberately. And the decision I was about to make would be completely unexpected. The weeks leading up to the wedding were pure tension. Julia's subtle manipulations had created this constant background stress that I couldn't shake. Every family interaction turned into a minefield. Even casual conversations were laced with judgment and comparison. Courtney, maybe you should consider a smaller venue, my mom suggested one afternoon, and I could feel the sting behind her helpful advice. My heart sank a little more with each comment. I had never felt so isolated, yet a strange clarity began to form within me. This was my moment to assert myself. Mark stayed my rock through all of it. He reminded me that our wedding wasn't just a date on a calendar, it was the culmination of years of love, planning, and hope. It's not about competing with her, Courtney. It's about making your day ours, he said, squeezing my hand with unwavering support. His words anchored me, giving me the courage to think strategically rather than emotionally. For the first time, I began to see this conflict as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Despite the external chaos, I spent long nights imagining the outcome I wanted. I pictured Julia's smug confidence crumbling, her family finally seeing her true colors, and me standing tall, proud, and unshaken. I also allowed myself to feel the anger, to let it fuel a plan that would be precise and unassailable. I journaled my strategy in the quiet hours, mapping out steps, contingencies, and backup plans. It became my obsession, not out of malice, but because I refused to let someone dictate the happiness I had meticulously worked for. Then came the moment of ultimate humiliation. One evening, a cousin casually asked if I was still on for my date, and when I explained, they laughed nervously and said, "Well, I guess everyone's confused now." My stomach turned. Even my extended family, those who had once been my pillars of support, seemed to question my right to hold on to my day. For a brief, gut-wrenching moment, I wondered if it was even worth the fight. But that doubt was fleeting. I remembered every slight, every comparison, every achievement overshadowed. I thought about my engagement, the love Mark and I shared, and the life we were building. I realized that the true power lay not in fighting openly but in choosing a path that no one, not Julia, not my parents, not even my relatives, would see coming. This was my chance to reclaim the narrative. And once I made my move, there would be no turning back. It was during these days of emotional turbulence that I began subtly preparing my unexpected decision. Every vendor I contacted, every plan I double-checked, and every piece of information about Julia's wedding became part of my quiet, calculated strategy. I remained cordial and polite around her, never revealing the storm brewing behind my calm demeanor. The anticipation of the payoff, of finally witnessing her reaction, became the only thing that kept me centered amid the swirling family pressure and relentless manipulation. The turning point came during a routine visit to the venue. I had arranged to meet the manager under the guise of confirming final details. As I walked through the halls, I realized the solution had been right under my nose the entire time. The venue had multiple spaces, and Julia had only reserved the main hall, leaving smaller, equally beautiful rooms unused. I smiled inwardly, a plan forming with crystal clarity. I would proceed with my wedding on the same date, in the alternate space, with the perfect setup that rivaled hers. I made calls, confirmed vendors, and quietly secured every last detail. Flowers, catering, music, photography, everything aligned seamlessly. I even booked extra decor to subtly upstage the main hall without appearing arrogant. By the time Julia realized my plan, the contrast would be undeniable. My wedding would radiate elegance, charm, and personal touches she could never match. To add to the effect, I subtly invited a few influential friends and relatives whose presence would naturally draw attention away from Julia's ceremony. I didn't need to compete loudly, I just needed to shine quietly, naturally, and with undeniable grace. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances in front of Julia and my parents, nodding politely at their plans, feigning stress and uncertainty while the real strategy quietly unfolded. As the big day approached, my excitement grew. The beauty of this plan wasn't just revenge, it was empowerment. I wasn't attacking Julia directly or making a scene, I was taking control of my narrative, proving that I deserved my moment as much as anyone else. Every detail was perfect, every decision deliberate, and every moment of anticipation exhilarating. The morning of the wedding, Julia was glowing, oblivious to the fact that her attempts to overshadow me were about to backfire spectacularly. She floated around in her designer dress, talking endlessly to guests about how she had secured the perfect date, completely unaware that the real day, the one that mattered most, was about to unfold elsewhere. Meanwhile, I prepared with Mark, focusing on our ceremony, our vows, and the people who truly mattered to us. When we arrived at the venue, the alternate hall was transformed into a breathtaking space. Candles flickered, flowers bloomed perfectly, and every element reflected our personalities and dreams. Guests arrived and were immediately captivated by the warmth and elegance of the room. Slowly but surely, word began to spread. People who had attended Julia's wedding first began to whisper about the beautiful setup next door, the laughter, the love, and the carefully curated details. And then, as planned, the ultimate moment arrived. A few key relatives and friends who had been quietly observing both weddings approached the main hall and asked Julia's parents if they wanted to see the other ceremony. The subtle shift in attention, the ripple of awe spreading among guests, was the final touch. Julia's confident smile faltered, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that my calculated choice had turned the tables completely, without me ever needing to confront her directly. 7. Payoff/sister's reaction, 600 words. Julia's reaction was priceless. Initially, she tried to maintain her composure, forcing smiles and commenting on how beautiful her day was. But as more guests gravitated toward our ceremony, subtly acknowledging the elegance and personal touches, her facade began to crumble. Her whispers turned to panicked glances. She approached me later, pretending to congratulate me, but her tone was thinly veiled with irritation. Even my parents couldn't hide their surprise. Mom tried to make polite comments about the beauty of my wedding, and Dad, usually so reserved, nodded appreciatively at the decor and arrangement. It was subtle, but it was enough to make Julia realize that her plan to overshadow me had failed. Every manipulation, every petty act of spite, had been neutralized, and in some ways, turned against her. Guests who attended both events started comparing, favoring the experience they had in our hall. Compliments flowed naturally toward the ceremony I had orchestrated, and the energy was unmistakably warm and celebratory. Julia could see it, and her frustration became more apparent with each passing moment. But I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The quiet confidence, the natural elegance, and the flawless execution spoke for themselves. Mark and I shared a private smile during the ceremony. The tension, the pressure, the weeks of manipulation, all had led to this moment of empowerment. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, knowing that we had reclaimed our day, asserted our dignity, and delivered a quiet yet undeniable statement about our worth and autonomy. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about finally proving, to everyone and especially to Julia, that my happiness wasn't negotiable. By the end of the day, Julia's composure was completely gone. She tried to salvage her evening, but guests' conversations and subtle glances continually reminded her of the unspoken truth. My wedding had become the highlight, the day that mattered most. Every effort she had made to undermine me had been neutralized through careful planning, poise, and quiet determination. Even in private moments, when our families tried to discuss the competition, I remained calm, composed, and unshakable. My decision to act strategically, rather than react impulsively, had transformed what could have been a bitter, stressful experience into a moment of personal triumph. I felt empowered, proud, and finally respected by everyone, including the people who had once doubted my resolve. Looking back, I realized that the most important victory wasn't the attention or the applause, it was reclaiming my own sense of control and dignity. Julia's spite could have ruined my day, but instead, it became the catalyst for asserting myself in a way she never expected. Mark and I walked through our wedding day with confidence, love, and clarity, knowing we had stayed true to ourselves. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is quiet, strategic, and filled with grace. And that day, for the first time, I felt truly unstoppable.